We're now joined by my good friend and a leader in the Jewish community, as well as being the chairman of Likud UK. His name is Zalmi Unsdorfer, currently in Jerusalem, but he's also the son of a famous Holocaust survivor, Simche Undsorfer, who wrote the famous book, The Yellow Star. Zalmi, it's always a pleasure to interview you, especially as you're in Jerusalem. As we mark the 78th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau by the Russian Red Army, and we mark International Holocaust Memorial Day, what does this day mean to you?
Clearly, it's important that this is marked for the future generations, and obviously the target has to be the younger generations. It's just, I find a great sadness that the rise in anti-Semitism today is very markedly prevalent in the campuses, in the university campuses. And I think the importance of marking this occasion has to be matched by action by university dons and the faculty of these institutions to apply zero tolerance to this kind of thing, and to make sure that the true history of this Holocaust, I would call it the industrialized genocide of the Jewish people, is remembered and taught in its full colour.
Absolutely. And Zalmi, your father was famous for this incredible book, and I've read it. It's absolutely inspiring and inspirational of how your father, Simche, survived the Nazi genocide. Can you share a little bit with us about your father's remarkable story and the book he wrote, detailing his horrible accounts at the hands of the Nazis?
He was taken with his parents, his mother and his father. He was 19 years old. His father was a rabbi, and they were taken from Czechoslovakia in a cattle train to Auschwitz. My grandparents were killed on the same night of arrival. My father, at 19 years old, escaped selection for death, even though he didn't look particularly healthy specimen at the time. And during one selection by the notorious Dr. Mengele, the angel of death, my father was pushed forward in a line of people so that the whole selection line collapsed in a heap. And by the time they, after a screaming Mengele said, "Start again," by the time they'd started again, they had changed my father's appearance, taken his glasses off and put a beret on his head. And as a result of that, he survived, and that's why I'm speaking to you today.
Very powerful, emotional story, Zalmi. Tell us, over the centuries, we've seen vile propaganda against Jews that have sparked hate crimes right and left, and that were a big part of the Third Reich's policy against the Jews. We're seeing, I believe, at the moment, an increase in conspiracy theories, similar propaganda. What can we learn from those days leading up to the horrors of Auschwitz and indeed other camps in our watching of the situation today?
Well, I find it, look, at the time my father and his parents and his cousins and brother-in-law and so forth, many members of the family, and also my mother's family, were being killed in Auschwitz and other camps. We were just Jews. We were stateless people, a minority people who were, had suffered pogroms and all kinds of, the Spanish Inquisition and so forth throughout the ages. Now that we have the State of Israel, it's a different paradigm, because now Israel is the Jew amongst the nations, and it is discriminated as a country, just the same way as a Jew was discriminated by the peoples of the world. So, for example, you will see that 90% of the resolutions of the United Nations are against Israel, whilst countries all over the world are oppressing their people and carrying out all manner of chemical and other horrific acts, and they get off with with barely a slap on the wrist. I was thinking today that we're just coming up to 1 year of the war in Ukraine. Tens of thousands of people have been killed in the most horrific way, indiscriminate bombing and rocketing by Russia. There has not been, and I live in London, there has not been one demonstration outside the Soviet embassy protesting this. But if Israel responds to a missile attack, an indiscriminate missile attack from Gaza, and thereby wishes to defend itself, 20,000 people will show up in Knightsbridge outside the Israeli embassy. This sums it up, really, for me.
Yeah. And Zalmi, I've got to ask you this very, very difficult question regarding Holocaust education. I mean, in terms of Holocaust education, we have the Holocaust documentaries on our TVs. We have films like the Holocaust, Schindler's List and others. We have interviews with Holocaust survivors. Our national newspapers are full of interviews with the Holocaust survivors. It's in the English national education system. And yet, is Holocaust education now irrelevant because we're seeing a huge rise, unprecedented rise in Jew hatred across the Western world? And there seems to be a total disconnect between what happened to your father and your family during the Second World War at the hands of the Nazis, and a connection between that and the challenges the Jewish people face across the world with this increase in anti-Semitism.
Unfortunately, anti-Semitism will never go away. Anti-Semitism is the most illogical hatred, because if you actually think about it, you would assume that if any part of society, if any people or group of people managed to provide so much to the world in terms of 20% of the Nobel Prizes and the movie industry and arts and sciences, Einstein, all kinds of medical discoveries, you name it, the mobile phone, Waze, the navigation, all these things that the Jews have given to the world, you would think that they would be considered to be a valued member of any society. And you would think that the only people for whom anger should be directed and hatred should be directed are people who bomb buildings and crash airplanes into skyscrapers and so forth. And yet it's completely the opposite way around. It's completely the opposite way around. And you never see a demonstration against Iran, which is sponsoring all this terror. You see them every 5 minutes over Israel. So I think it's more than just creating monuments to the Holocaust. The history of the Nazi Holocaust is there for people who want to research it. I think what's important is to outlaw the hate speech on campus and try to have an impression on the next generation. That's what's the most crucial part.
Absolutely. And Zalmi, can you just share with us what Christians can do to stand up to this rising level of Jew hatred that we're seeing today, which was the main ideological reason why the Nazis carried out the final solution, and something that we should not tolerate or accept? And also, what role can Christians play in terms of Holocaust education and getting the message out that this should never, ever happen again, particularly not on our watch?
Well, coming back to the campus scene, I would say that Christian groups should 100% be applying pressure on the faculty and of universities and campuses to make sure that this is absolutely dealt with with zero tolerance, because it is nothing other than baseless hatred, and needs to be eradicated. They also should encourage more Jewish societies and Israel societies to be set up on campus so that people, young people, actually feel they've got a safe place, a safe space to operate, instead of being frightened, literally frightened, to walk around campus with a Star of David on their neck, or even other signs of Jewish identity. That's, I think, the most useful thing that they could do. Obviously, other than applying pressure on their congressmen, where Christians are citizens of the United States.
Zalmi, I just want to thank you so much for joining us on Behind the Headlines to mark International Holocaust Memorial Day. Our thoughts and our prayers are very much with you during this very, very difficult time. And we just thank you so much for your father's remarkable book. Here it is, The Yellow Star.
Thank you, Simon.
Pleasure.